Mr. President of the General Assembly, thank you very much for convening us and for your commitment and leadership, mobilizing us all for climate action. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, the United Nations and this Assembly were created precisely for the kind of challenge that brings us together today. The climate crisis is a code red for humanity. And this Assembly and governments around the world face a moment of truth. In 6 days, world leaders will be put to the test at COP26 in Glasgow. Their actions or inactions will show their seriousness about addressing this planetary emergency. And the warning signs are hard to miss. Pollution kills 9 million people every year. Every day, dozens of species go extinct. Scorching temperatures are turning farmlands into parched landscapes. Cities and entire countries are watching sea levels rise around them. Increasing temperatures will make vast stretches of our planet unlivable by century's end. And last week, a new report from The Lancet described climate change as the defining narrative of human health in the years to come. A crisis defined by widespread hunger, respiratory illness, deadly disasters, and infectious disease outbreaks that could be even worse than COVID-19. Despite these alarm bells ringing at fever pitch, we see new evidence today in the emissions gap report that governments' actions so far simply do not add up to what it is so desperately needed. We are still on track for a global temperature rise of 2.7 degrees Celsius, a far cry from the 1.5 degrees Celsius target to which the world agreed under the Paris Agreement. A target that science tells us is the only sustainable pathway for our world, and one that is entirely achievable. If we can reduce emissions by 45% compared to 2010 levels this decade, if we can achieve global net zero by 2050, and if world leaders arrive in Glasgow with bold, ambitious and verifiable 2030 targets and new concrete policies to reverse this disaster. G20 leaders in particular need to deliver. The time has passed for diplomatic niceties. If governments, especially G20 governments, do not stand up and lead this effort, we are headed for terrible human suffering. But all countries need to realize that the old carbon-burning model of development is a death sentence for their economies and for our planet. We need decarbonization now, across every sector, in every country. We need to shift subsidies from fossil fuels to renewable energy and tax pollution, not people. We need to put a price on carbon and channel that back towards resilient infrastructures and jobs. And we need to phase out coal by 2030 in OECD countries and by 2040 in all other countries. And governments are increasingly agreeing to stop financing coal. Now private finance needs to do the same urgently. Mesdames et Messieurs les représentants.
Ladies and gentlemen, representatives, citizens are rightly expecting from their governments that they provide an example. But it's up to each and every one of us to preserve our collective future. The corporations must review their impact on the climate and take credible measures for their activities and their financing so that it would be fully compatible with a zero-emission future. No more excuses. No more whitewashing. It's crucial that public and private investors face up to the situation. They have to join initiatives such as the Net Zero Banking Initiative and the UN Staff Pension Fund, which has even exceeded its objectives when it comes to reducing the carbon borrowings of its investments with a drop of 30% in 2031. In all societies, citizens must make more responsible choices, whether it's comes to their food, their travel, or their purchases as far as consumption goes. Young people and young activists must continue their impetus and demand action from the part of their leaders at all levels. Global solidarity is necessary in order to help all countries carry out this transition. And developing countries are facing debt and liquidity crises. They must be supported. Development banks, public and private multilateral banks, must expand their climate investment portfolio and step up their efforts to help countries build resilient economies that are compatible with a zero-emission future. They must develop their commitment to devote at least $100 billion a year to financing climate action in developing countries. I would ask a new effort from donors and multilateral banks to ensure that at least 50% of the amounts that they invest in climate be devoted to climate adaptation and resilience in the developing world.
76 years, this assembly has gathered the world around crisis after crisis to build consensus for action. But rarely have we faced a crisis like this one, a truly existential crisis that, if not addressed, threatens not only us, but succeeding generations. There is one path forward. A 1.5-degree future is the only livable future for humanity. And I urge leaders to get on with the job before it is too late. And I thank you.